Okay, we're live.
Okay, wonderful. Well, welcome everyone to such an important conversation. And if we're introducing you to Jacqueline, I'm privileged to introduce Dr. Jacqueline Hobbs, who's here with us. And I know many of you know Jacqueline very intimately as well. So we have a mix of people on this conversation. But welcome everyone and welcome Jacqueline. We're so blessed to be with you.
Oh, it's very exciting.
We did a live video yesterday introducing how we met you and some of our experience in more detail, but I'll just say that we encountered Jacqueline for the first time last summer. A friend of mine, I was struggling with some patterns, some family patterns, possibly multi-lifetime patterns, and I was introduced. A friend said, you must join the purification space with Oracle Girl Jacqueline. And I looked and I think I wasn't quite ready, and I continued to struggle with that same thing which I had been for a long time. And then I finally got in enough pain, and I think that I started to listen to some of your tracks, Jacqueline, and just the truth was just the vibration, the truth was just calling to me so strongly. And so I joined the Reboot group, and everything began to change. As you say, it begins to happen instantly. So Jacqueline runs, she'll talk much more about it than I, but Jacqueline runs a website and a number of groups now in a purification space, which is about purifying from the patterns that are holding us back from our pure expression as pure love, and coming back to your true source connection. So we'll talk, since we have a mixed audience here of people who are new to you and people who are very close to your work, we'll start out a little bit by introducing and exploring what the purification space is with you, and a little bit about who you are. Because as a friend said to me, this is unlike anything you've ever done.
Well, that's a good write-up, huh?
And there was no coaching call to join or anything like that. It was quite different. So very powerful, most powerful thing that I've ever experienced. So thank you, Jacqueline. It's an honor.
Oh, so welcome. Well, I suppose the first thing to say is that perhaps what I do is very, very different, because in a certain sense, I don't really do anything in the conventional way. I don't offer a technique or a modality or a path. I'm not religious or spiritual. I'm not interested in politics or economics. I'm actually, if you like, the message that I give, rather than even having a message to give. I am a model of a new way of being and an upgraded form of the human being which everyone is currently moving towards. And this is very much a part of our time and what all of us have been waiting for and are really, really so ready for. We have instructions in our body, in our cells, that are ready for these times. And by these times, I mean very much from this year onwards and the events we are currently seeing in this world. And the thing is that all human beings do have these patterns, just as you were experiencing, that are tied into their identity. And until very recently in the history of humanity, we have not really had many tools for actually overcoming patterns, because we have been limited by the fact that even if we have very good tools, our identity will still be vibrating at a certain frequency. And that frequency has not been at the precise setting that it takes to actually switch into our own self-healing ability and release the patterns from the identity structure ourselves. And that's the great gift of these times. We are starting to rise in vibration because as a collectivity, we have started to so deeply desire change that we have begun to upgrade ourselves through rising our own frequency through that very intense heart vibration. And then we have started to move into a whole zone where we switch on all sorts of secret packages that we have on board that actually always have been part of the human condition, but that we haven't had access to until very recent times. And I am an example of someone who is just a little bit ahead on that pathway. That pathway is different for each person, but it has the same characteristics. Very slowly, from the time that you come across me or a similar message with the same potency, first of all, your family patterns start to shed, and then you start to move into the area where the archetypes and the patterns behind your family and your society begin to disappear. And then very slowly, it moves into the whole framework of your identity and also the pattern in the earth of the place that you were born. As those things start to undo, you start to switch on everyone around you. And with the rising vibration of what's going on Earth now, because Earth herself is waking up because of that deep desire in human beings, we are starting to go full quantum crazy. And that's why we're seeing what we are seeing in the world situation right now.
Mm-hmm.
The current world situation was not caused by any one nation or any deep state undercover operation. It was caused by your frequency going up and starting to buckle and fracture and splinter the very edifice on which all those things you see going on in external society are built. And the purification space is just the frequency that I emit, which is able to speed up the deletion of your own patterns by your own self-healing ability being switched on. And that starts switching on from the very moment that you come across me. And if you get involved in a personal purification, which is the reboot group that you were just talking about, then you will start to shed your patterns now so fast because of the numbers who are joining the group, which is a part of what speeds the purification as well, that you will then start to access those instructions within you that are ready for these times. So, a lot of people say to me all the time, oh, what do I do? And then after they get over that one, they say, well, how do I do it? In the purification space, and this is why it's also different, what I do, you don't need those answers. The instructions are inside you. They will start to switch on, and it all becomes about what starts to occur in your body zone, because your body already knows what to do. And it starts to actually work from the inside out with you. And that doesn't require teachings or paths or practices. And to be honest, we're over those things, aren't we? They were great to start off with, or at the time, but they really are not quite as powerful now as they were. And we need to actually excel into those pathways, out of them, and graduate into a full-blown crazy version of ourselves, which is our uniqueness and our genius and our innovation and also our courage and our daring and our refusal to accept things which do not serve us and the planet.
So this inclination, this you've referred to it as a gift. Was this something you were aware of when you were young? Like, how did you come to be clear that this was your mission and this was kind of how to execute this mission? Where did that all begin for you?
Well, this is also quite different as well, really, because in some ways, yes, it's true that I do have a gift or a set of extraordinary gifts, like everybody does, actually, but it is a little bit more than that. I knew that I would come here, and I knew what I would do even before I came here. That's a slightly different perspective.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not incredibly important, although I know it is intriguing and quite interesting, but I don't want to distract people too much. But let's just say that I am a part of a group of 5 beings who are all here on the planet right now. Some are more hidden and some are more visible. And between us, we are in charge of guarding what I loosely call the purification space, which is that external model of a space which is completely clean and completely safe, and that focuses only on people activating what they have inside them without me imposing or directing or taking an authority or a guru stance. There are very, very few examples of this on the planet, although there are increasingly more. And, you know, someone recently said to me, oh, well, you know, there's only one of you, or there's only 5 of you. I mean, that's not many, is it? How's it going to be, you know, that, you know, everybody gets this? You've got the purification space inside you. It's my job to resonate that in your presence so you remember. And then all of us will be holding down the purification space. So it's not really about me, even though I am the one that perhaps has stood up and said certain things and then offered that range of gifts that I also have within perhaps the more human zone.
For people who are new to you, Jacqueline, can you talk a little bit more about purification and how we all have this ability to self-heal?
Yes.
How does that work?
Yes.
How do we activate that?
Yeah, sometimes we get quite sort of, you know, hooked up on how it works, and it is important. I mean, the main thing is that it just works, okay? And either you resonate with that statement and you believe it, or you don't. The people who join, usually they have a recognition, and even if they don't, something deeper in them really does already know, and it's about to come up to the surface.
Mm-hmm.
To answer your question, you know, everyone is a being of love. And I'm not talking about, you know, cheesy love or partner love or family love or compassionate love or spiritual love. I'm actually talking about the raw matter of reality. It's a very radical force of change. And it's the thing that underwrites all of creation. It actually exists before the source, or before the mechanics of your source connection. Your source connection is the wiring that you have in your physical body to receive the full spectrum of your identity. And most people are shut out of the majority of their identity, and they only function on a very small part of that. And in, for example, New Age circles, that is sometimes the distinction between higher and lower self. But pure love is even a step on from that. Even once our source connection purifies of its patterns and we open to all of our ability, what then starts to be available to us as human beings is this mysterious thing that I'm calling pure love. It's actually really the song of creation when we get down to it. And it is a type of matter that in the end transmutes your whole physical body. So you become, you could say, wholly human, or even more than human. You become the new human. And the new human is a radical embodiment of a force of pure love, change and transmutation that is beyond our wildest dreams, and we will see it in our lifetime. The type of thing where we are able even just to walk past someone and they will automatically shed the majority of their patterns if they're still asleep. Where if we open our mouth, we will be able to effect and switch on a self-healing effect for thousands of others, if not tens of thousands, listening to us. And these things will come. It is early days. But not only that, the abilities of the human being to dream and manifest a new creation from that song within us, it harnesses with all of the beings on this planet, animals, plants, all of the different natural environments and their consciousnesses. And this is why in the Guardians of the Future group that I have started the series of groups, which will be beginning soon, we are going to have a set of groups called Planet Earth, which are based on hooking up with these consciousnesses in our creation so that we then switch on what probably some people would describe as our superordinary abilities to commune with the natural world. That's just a few examples. We have the ability to purify our leaders. There will also be Guardian of the Future groups shortly for us all to join safely and cleanly in the purification space, and us to start working on the meltdown, which is starting to happen now on the government level, because the structures behind the governments now have already gone, even though it's not apparent. And we have the ability to change not only deep shadow, satanic forces, and the nature of thought on this planet, but we have the ability also to shape and upgrade and change the bodies of our leaders so they receive more of our source connection. So even going back to your previous question about, what it is that I do and why it's so different, I'm very passionate about making sure that those people who join the purification space are also purifying others themselves, and not just receiving a personal purification and the help that they need, which of course is a very important first layer of the purification space, but can leave you feeling almost quite passive and always receiving help or assistance. There is a place for help, and if it's healthy help, there's no problem with help. We don't need to be totally isolated and do it all ourselves. That's certainly not how nature works, and that's not how human beings work. We are interrelated and interconnected beings, but we also need so desperately to get past this notion of having a limited definition of autonomy, or even a downgraded version of spirituality, which is actually just the path of least resistance and is also often extremely abusive.
Ooh, there's a few. I see a few places to go now. I think I definitely want to, I don't know, I think I'll try to fold this in through the conversation, but I'd like to hear your views on, so spirituality is kind of like a bridge to a realization or an openness or a kind of a channel or a flow. And it's very interesting that you're kind of talking about it as this in that way, because what we've been feeling here is a sort of it seems kind of obsolete in a certain way. It seems sort of now is the time to kind of shed all of those, any sort of dependency on even a teaching or a path or a teacher technique, which I find very, very fascinating that is kind of past tense. But I think I think we ought to take this now into kind of what's happening, because I know that's a great interest to you and to us. So I guess from your perspective, we all have our perspectives about what's happening in the world and the coronavirus and the shutdowns and everything. Maybe just in a very general way, without me kind of introducing any ideas, how do you see what's happening? What is really going on from your perspective?
It's simple. Game over. The shadow forces behind our current structures, who to the main extent have had a negative and destructive effect, no longer have the power to shape our reality. In fact, their plug has been pulled, and they are so limited now that they have been forced in the few early months of this year to pull a master stroke in a desperate bid to regain, rather than assert, their control. And so far, what's happening is that the majority of reality has been dictated by them, and a large percentage of the world population still believe it through their media platforms. And a small percentage really don't and are deeply questioning the more micro points, because the macro points are so obvious to them. And what's happening now is a dividing of the ways. The small minority who can see what is happening and understand it very deeply and have known for a long time and been ready, or as ready as they can be, are gaining power so exponentially. They are already our new governments. Not governments in the classical sense of they're not all going to troop down to Washington or the capital city of the country and take office in the big buildings and start passing laws. But it is their frequency which is beginning to dictate the nature of reality, because they carry the codes literally for it in their vibration and in their patterning that is linked already deeply with the earth and all of our external reality. And that's a subject that's quite big to go into, because it's quite technical to explain even how the immensely advanced technology of our bodies does actually control reality. But it does, and it's been switched off or switched down, and it's been controlled and destroyed by these more shadow forces in our societies and our environments for a long time. That's all ending. And the way that the two paths will divide is that what will happen is that the people who have this deep understanding of what's going on, as they switch on more and more, they will become the platform for the new reality and the new societies. And the larger wedge, if you like, that starts to break off and just crash into the sea will go along the route that it has chosen for itself, which can be still changed at any time, although it's getting increasingly more difficult. It will go in the direction of those choices, and as much as those choices are pinned into the previous structures and more shadow vibrations. How's that for a start? Do you want to ask me some questions?
That's great. In the recent Silent Immersion, you released many, many very powerful tracks that I felt like I was just having that experience of being switched on.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, that's exactly what they were for. Yeah.
Yes, it worked. What would you say, you've said both that we created this because we were waking up, and this time had to come because
yes,
we don't want to go back to the way it was.
Yeah.
What would you say is our call? Like, what is the call to humanity? What did we come to do right now?
The call to humanity is probably the same call that it's always been on this planet, which is you are already free. Don't give it away.
Mm-hmm.
And humanity has forgotten the power of its own spiritual consciousness in the true sense of the word, which is actually a physical consciousness and a body consciousness. The final attempt by those shadow forces is to convince you that your body does not belong to you. And that project has been well in progress for a very long time, because not only with, automation and many of the devices that we see around us, but there has been a progressive gap that has been inserted into our reality, where there is all sorts of questioning over how and where and when and why we should use our bodies. And if we do, that is controlled. And then with the virtualization of our reality, technology has been very unfairly downgraded and hamstrung into becoming really a tool of control and limitation and slavery, rather than what it should be, which is an immensely incredible force for further powering and manifesting the model or the dream that the human being is possible of putting into this current planetary reality. All human beings have the ability. It's not so much a creative ability. We don't need a creative ability. We're far more powerful than that. We actually only need the ability to light the torch that we already carry. We contain patterns. And what's happened is we've become diverted into accepting and even reproducing destructive patterns and switching off the actual patterning unit within the body that models and lays down the paths for an ever more enlightened future. And when we start operating along that patterning that goes towards an enlightened future, all we have to do is love the sound and deeply desire or be desirous of what it is that we dream through our bodies. And then it happens. We don't even have to create it. Because if you create something, right, there's a gap. between what you create and it coming into form. That's not how human beings actually operate. And the shadow agendas on this planet have even insidiously slipped into our spirituality to the extent that they suggest that we might even have to create a reality to make it happen, when in fact we are literally dream machines with everything on board that's already needed. And all we have to do is freak out because we love the feeling and the idea of it so much. And that excitement rockets our frequency and everything goes, and reality changes. That's how the human being operates. But what gets in the way is, I will have to work it out. I need the money first before I can do it. I have to create it. Manifest, 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 manifest. Right? This is falsity. It's an esteemed idea to a point, because of course when these ideas started coming about, they were far more advanced than anything else that was around. It's stepping stones, right? But one stepping stone always comes after another, and we climb on the shoulders of previous ideas. And our purpose now really is to strip out the impurity in our own source connection from these other systems and ideas, so we keep the best, and we can be very much in humility and in a reverence of those systems and those things. I'm not here to, spread hatred or dissent towards anything, but we give thanks for that, so that we recognize that it is pointing us back actually to the full version of our own human selves. We are not creators. We model reality and we dream it. And that is reality. You see, the positive future that I keep saying, it's not a prediction. It already exists. And if you align with that through purification out of your system of the patterns that are in the way, it's already there in reality, ready to actually be installed, literally. There's no creation necessary. It will start to form around you. And even though this sounds very, very abstract, if you think about it in more concrete times, we all know the experience. If you're thinking something and suddenly it happens, or someone walks round the corner, the delay is just the amount of patterns you've still got left in your system. And that the reason why everything is joining up and becoming so much more synchronous is because the patterns are falling away so fast. But you don't suddenly think, oh, right, okay, I'm going to have to make that happen when that synchronous event happens. It just happens, and you go, hey, it just happened, because everything was so lined up. So it's about alignment with the way that you actually work and stripping out what gets in the way of it, rather than trying to engage in a modality or in a technique or something to do that forces something into reality that you want. Because then it comes from an agenda, right? And you don't need an agenda. If you have an agenda, you are still operating out of those more negative type patterns, because the space out of which modeling is reality doesn't need an agenda, because the instructions are already there in there. If you have a set of instructions, then you're not coming out of your source connection. You're coming out of someone else's or something else's system. I hope that's really clear. It's a major problem for the beings on this planet. The beings on this planet look up, and they look up because originally they were rewired by beings who came from up and came down, and they were taught to listen to them. And it's in every system on this planet now. And we are moving out of that paradigm. So we will reinterpret the best of our systems and take it on through our own apparatus again and honor the systems of the past that really worked for us, and we will just jettison the rest.
I'd like to just develop one little piece of that, or hear you talk to it, which is the role of action and doing. Is there a role? What is that role? How does that occur from this
I
perspective?
love this question. So many books have been written and can be written on it, but it's just so simple. Okay, so when you still have patterns, it's a bit like wanting a path or a practice. You know, action is about, well, but what do I do? Okay, and then action by definition becomes something that is different from being passive. Okay, so there's a contrast. When you take action, you actually feel that you initiate it and you make a decision. That's when you're still in the realm of patterns and you are still shedding out and purifying the majority of your patterns. Later, it changes. You get into that more synchronous reality I was just talking about, where the force literally of your internal instructions shapes you. And you're not passive to that internal force. Actually, what happens is you come so fucking alive, you can't stop yourself, and you put your ingredients into it as the amazing magical individual that you are. And then it's not even a co-creation, two words I don't really like very much, co and creating, but they'll do, I suppose. It's not even that you're separate from it to be able to co anything, and you're certainly not creating, as I said earlier. You are just on fire and you cannot stop, because all of you is in one place at one time. It is your passion, and you know. So you could say you are supremely active in that state, where the action and the actor and the activity is all actually the same as being completely passive, because in a way you've got no choice, because it's wholly who you are. So all these metaphysical discussions about choice or no choice, free will or no, all of that disappears. And actually, you don't care, because you are loving it so much and you feel so alive and driven. And in this area, you cannot go wrong, because you are functioning directly out of the embodiment of pure love, which knows and does no harm. Completely new and different way of being for the human being. The original setup and design for the human being, which is not only coming back, but has now been through a couple of upgrades as well. So we are on the next level with the human species, which is wild.
That's magnificent. Thank you.
Everybody's watching, by the way.
Yeah.
All the different dimensions and beings which will shortly walk into us and come on board with us. They can't wait. They have been locked out for so long, and the physical and practical parameters of this planet have been such a bore and so closed off to the higher frequencies. But when all this really goes off, boy, it's going to be the greatest show ever. It really is.
Kind of following up on that question, and maybe it's relevant to each person, but I know a lot of people are wondering right now, what can I do? And how can I affect reality? And if this is a mirror of us, and how much of it is we continue to purify, and that is the work, and how much of it is action in the world? Or is it just dependent on each person's joy and bubbling up, as you were talking about?
Both. Of course, it must be always dependent on what is there with each individual person, because everybody, first of all, has got a different role, and you must claim your own personal sovereignty. This is what this is all about. So if it's not you self-referencing with yourself and your source connection, then there's no point. Okay. So that's the quick answer to what you're saying. The more in-depth answer is that there are some very specific things that are always bound into the context of each situation as we go along. We're in a different patch now to what we were with the current world situation, which is incredibly important to grasp. And slowly I've been building up my message as I go along to really get this across to people. Sounds as though I'm sort of planning it, but actually the words do just come out. The message just keeps building up with each stage. So, you know, first of all, we had the, oh, sounds like there might be a problem somewhere in China, to, oh, shit, we're locked down in our houses. Oh, Christ, what do we do? Etc., etc. And then we moved into, oh, this is not so bad. I'm getting to catch up on a lot of sleep. I don't have to go to work, or perhaps I liked it, but I don't miss certain things, and I can do other things now. And hopefully it'll be okay. Oh, we're being supported a little bit by some of our governments. Okay, get used to it. Then lockdown for most countries starts to end. Relax, relax, relax. Back to work. Maybe things will go back to normal, or it will never be the same again, but it will be semi-normal. Okay. But now really examining yourself about what to do is very critical, because it's none of those things. Does everybody watching understand what's really happening right now? First of all, the plug has been pulled on those shadow elements behind our governments. Our governments do not really control our societies. There are elements behind them, or let's say working with them or through them, that have been in control. They have gone, but you can't see it because it's still the same old media, the same old government figures, and still the same laws, institutions, workplaces, and everyday society, except for it being a bit shut down right now, that it's always been. That reality hasn't quite filtered through yet. And in this patch now, every world situation or historical situation also has patterns. What's happening is a building tension now, where as classical actors, you have an enormously critical contribution to make. If the controlling forces behind our governments have now disappeared, and our governments are still continuing and trying to hold on to all the ropes, anything that comes through those structures, be it still hooked into shadow or not, according to those people in those government levels, is like the air going out of a balloon. So those people may say certain things to you, but it has no permanent substance. As we go further into the future, those edifices of power will no longer exist as we know them. So this is already a call to you to say, obsolete. What's coming through those channels, use that to make your own decisions. Because if you keep making your decisions on what is said out there and not is what is said in here, you will actually slow down the crumbling of external society and all of the things that were hooked into those shadow forces. And that will make it longer, slower, and harder than it needs to be. All sorts of things are going to be said to you shortly with the patterns that are unfolding, which if you decide, and it is your decision, if you decide to go along with, you may find that you are doing things that are not only unnecessary, but seriously endanger your ability to stay in the body on this planet. So really check in with yourself about whether you do actually know inside you that these things are the right thing to do. It doesn't matter if a doctor says them. It doesn't matter if any type of authority suggests something to you. I want to remind you of something that is extremely important, that there is an international law on this planet that says, even in a time of emergency, when certain rules, particularly medical rules, are turned aside, that every single member of the global population still has the right to decide for themselves what they decide to do. And that even the suggestion of something being overturned that has previously been said by law must not contravene any other international law of safety on this planet. I'd like to refer you actually to this verbatim. The International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights, Article 4, says that in the time of public emergency, which threatens the life of a nation, state parties may take measures derogating from their obligations to the extent strictly required by the exigencies of the situation, provided that such measures are not inconsistent with their other obligations under international law. The Nuremberg Code says the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential concerning permissible medical experiments. I urge every being on this planet to look up this legislation and use that to determine your actions when you're making decisions based on what you have inside you. It will be the difference between a very difficult situation where many people decide to accept measures that may endanger their life, and others who decide not to and remain a smaller minority, and it takes longer for the new vibration to take over. Please think about it.
Yes, I think just this morning here in the United States, and I won't say the word because I've heard that YouTube can hear the words you use and will actually kind of filter who they show this conversation to. But I think we all know what we're talking about here. It starts with a B. But it was announced here in the US today that they're trying to fast track such a measure to be available by January 2021. Just a little kind of piece of data to share along those lines.
Yes, and I've heard it said that, if it so happens that something has been made by someone, then the antidote to that thing already exists from the beginning of the emergence of that thing that was created.
Yeah. So so you kind of laid out a little map of kind of how this has gone a little bit. And I'm curious if you see, so what we're feeling here is that will eventually be a relaxing of these restrictions.
Starting to happen
here in the Western US. And then there will be a kind of a time window there where, as you said earlier, things will return to something kind of resembling normal, semi-normal. But do you sense that there will be a second kind of moment where we're kind of quarantined and locked down again? Is that something?
Patterns do suggest at the moment that will be the case. That's why I urge people to think very carefully about how they use their right to act, and also what they need to do in this patch should the majority decide to go along with any such recommendations that are made during that kind of situation.
Would you recommend folks listening to this to kind of look at their lives and think about what can we do in this period of semi-freedom, at least of mobility, that would put us in a better position, say, when a second lockdown comes about?
Yes, I would go further than that, and I would make some very strong suggestions, which of course it's everybody's right to think about and decide for themselves. I'm not telling you what to do, but I'm just suggesting very strongly. Get seeds, grow them, because the positive patterning of this situation even suggests that if we have a quick crumbling of our external society or structures and a changeover into more enlightened ways of being, it's very likely that there will be temporary, if not long-term, disruptions of food supply, money, etc. And you need to plan for this. Get seeds, start growing. It doesn't matter whether you're on a balcony in a flat in a capital city or whether you are in the countryside. You can get small grow bags and trays, and also there are many things that you can do within your home. Google it, find out, good old Google, and get prepared. That is the first thing. Really think carefully and look around in your local environment. If you're going to be locked down again, where can you be, or where do you want to be, and make sure that you are making as many active choices as you can around that. And I think that what's also very important is keep going with your personal purifications. Your frequency is what decides the outcome for you and others, not anything in the external layer of your reality. The more you purify patterns by self-healing, the quicker and the easier it is for you and others around you. It's easy to think, well, the silent immersion is over, or I've been doing this a while, or, things seem better now, I'll join later. Keep going. It's like anything, as the intensity builds, then a lot more comes online for you inside that you already have there, and the shedding of your patterns continues even faster.
I know you've said, I think you said recently, Jacqueline, that you don't see the future in the way that people classically think of an oracle.
No.
Talk a little bit about how you see the future, how you talk about the future, and what you see coming.
Yeah, you see, as all humans upgrade, they will understand a lot more clearly the way that they actually work and the way that things really work here on the planet. You know, the future actually is not a linear point in front of you. The future is actually a set of possibilities within the modeling apparatus that you have in your body. And you lock onto, if you like, the station that you have inside you, the wavelength where that possible future lies. And then along comes me, who is able to actually almost tap into where all the patterning is lined up across the whole consciousness of the planet. I have a read, if you like, a balance of that within my own body. It's designed that way. And then I can see which way the patterning is showing and going. And then the form that would be attached to that patterning is what I may actually speak of, but it's more, if you like, a projection out of a current state, if you like, a set of balances within the actual patterning of all human beings. That's very different from predicting a future based in classical times on seeing into a future space. People who see into a future space just see the form of the patterns that people still have not purified. And of course, up to now, not many people have been purifying. So it's quite easy to be accurate if you're a fairly good psychic or intuitive. Psychics and intuitives, they use their emotional and their spiritual bodies, and they actually project and they push their senses beyond their physical margins because they're quite evolved and they're not so identified with their body, but the lines along which they project themselves are actually based on unresolved patterns, both of their own and the people that they are reading for. And then they will speak or they will see through their senses, visually or auditorily, what is going on. It's a completely other type of way of being to what I'm talking about. Your identity apparatus, out of which psychic and intuitive abilities, channeling also comes out of, all of that apparatus is part, of, if you like, of a very partial step down capacity of the human being that actually human beings have been reduced to through toxicity, brainwashing and mind control, and also they have been biologically slowly switched down, and the DNA has been switched off into that very limited form of understanding space and time. Time has actually ended. So what I'm talking about when I talk about future is not really any type of future that's to do with time. I'm just talking actually about your synchronicity possibility. It's possibilities I talk about.
I want to say right now, if you're listening to this, watching this live, and you're on YouTube or in the OwnStream community Facebook, you have a question, feel free to post that. Because we're going to wrap up somewhat soon. I have a few more questions, Teresa probably does too, but now's the time to kind of invite others into this discussion should they have something. And we'll be sure to, we'll see it. I think one of the things that comes up for me, and I know a lot of people, are like close loved ones, parents, kids, family, friends who might not be, might not have found themselves drawn to this conversation today. What can they do? Is there anything they can do to support those closest to them at this very, very important time?
Yes, this is a difficult one because, of course, it's a very emotional topic and we all feel the need and the wish to save, to wake up and to educate those who may be still asleep. And also we don't want to upset them too much and rock the boat in case we lose those deep bonds that we have. There's a lot of fear around it. In most cases, and I'm able to just tap into what's going on with the people who are joining this broadcast tonight and also those who will watch it through the rewatch link in the future. In most cases, if you have a relative who is not listening and is asleep, they're going to wake up spectacularly. So don't waste too much of your time, because it is better sometimes to have an external shock rather than a shock from your relatives. And they will then come to you when they are so totally on their knees with what they see and what they realize, that then it will be more easy for you to explain and perhaps be listened to the extent that you're going to be. Okay, there's a small minority in the purification space, as well as in this group tonight, who really have a very strong job of really needing to strongly educate people and push their boundaries. And if you are in that category, and you'll recognize that when I say that, it's very important, probably as the major point to get across to people, is that something has really happened on this planet through those shadow forces that has meant that people now think that it's acceptable to say, well, you have your truth and I have my truth, and you know, we can allow both truths to exist, but in the end, the state or a religion tells us or decides what our truth is. And I'm going to mandate that on behalf of that external authority. Okay? That is a lie. The truth actually is immutable. It's a function of pure love itself, and it exists deep inside each and every one of us. It's a physical setting. And those types of things have really dissuaded us from listening to ourselves and then claiming our personal sovereignty and our right to make decisions about our own body. The truth is within you, and is why those original legal and international statutes were laid down all those centuries ago by great people who foresaw this time as well, and who said that the human being has the right to consent and freedom of choice, even over emergency measures. And there are some people here who are really dedicated to getting that message out very strongly, that the truth is the truth is the truth. It is inside you. And there are an even smaller minority amongst that group who are willing and maybe will give their lives for it. That's what's at stake. People will and are and always have given their lives for these truths. And there are some people who are on that pathway. And for them, it will be to continue to push those messages very, very strongly.
I know that you've said that there's going to be a mess. There's going to be chaos. There will be death. But after that, the world is bright. That's what we see. Can we talk a little bit more about that? What do you see?
Modeling of the future that is happening and that will happen is undoubtedly that there will be less people around, because there will be quite a few people who will not accept this vision. But this vision is beautiful, and it is of a new earth where all intelligences and all beings are once again interconnected and fully able to communicate and to be consciously cognizant of each other. It is a reality where we are living very close to nature, and it is a reality which is extremely technologically advanced, but the type of technology that does not do harm to anyone or that controls freedom, privacy, etc. And it is also the type of future where we as human beings also develop many more enlightened forms and types of experience for everyone to have on the planet, that comes out of a whole repertoire that as yet we've never ever experienced. There's so much new with a capital N that is coming. And one way or another, it is coming and it will come. There's no doubt about it.
What about, we've had some questions before this about community, how we will live together. Do you have specific visions of how our society will look, or what's the probability of what's coming?
Sure, it's all going to become about the local. I think there's going to be a massive recognition also that the reason why many of those forces were able to take over in the beginning was that the fabric of local community and the ability to meet in local community, to share and enjoy and speak and celebrate, broke down. And that will be highly treasured in the future. And there will be many laws that will be passed in the new societies around that, even much further than any of the legislation that we had, for example, as a result of the two world wars, to really protect the ability to physically honor and share together. And that will be local as well as nationally and globally. Local communities will really group around people who are distributing food, who are distributing the ability to connect through transport, who are providing medical and therapeutic support, and who are also providing business advice about how to start working and offering your gifts independently on the communication networks that remain. these things will be incredibly important. And local community will also really, really dedicate itself to cleaning up nature and the environment through clearing pollution and adopting technology to do that. It will be organized through each community locally, everywhere across the planet. And there will be a massive environmental cleanup in the next 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And that will be organized by many of the young new beings who are here.
You've also talked about how money will completely change. Maybe we could talk a little bit about that.
There will be no money. No, there will be forms of exchange. We will see, of course, one way or another, positive or negative, the disappearance of physical money. It's not really that great an idea to have physical cash. There is a positive slant to this as well as a negative one. Of course, the absence of physical cash can lead us susceptible to more totalitarian types of control. But what about a positive vision of a cashless society? What about exchange that was based only on the wish to include, if you like, value-based exchange? What if value changed just simply to being an economy of care and an economy of excitement and enjoyment and mutual cooperation? You might need a virtual or a physical way of expressing or tokens to celebrate or to mark that exchange, but you might equally just decide, well, who cares, and just get on with doing it. It will be both of those systems alongside each other. What I want to underline here is this economy of care will be the underpinning of any cryptocurrency system that comes in, and these are likely to come in under the new societies. And it is something that I would advise all people to start educating themselves about. Even if you don't understand it, just try to get your head around a little bit of it. It will become increasingly important to the extent that we have a financial structure and a communication system that supports it. Let's see which way those pathways go. But care is the currency of the way that human beings actually not only survive, but flourish and innovate and bring joy to each other. And when you come from that currency, you have a safety and a protection that means that everything in this universe swings behind you and propels you further and further into form and your body rather than out of it. So care is the name of the game, not self-interest, profit, or I'll just change my money into cryptocurrencies to make a killing, which is a lot of what we're seeing right now.
It seems like so much of our relationship to money kind of goes back to the whole, the thing you were speaking of earlier about creating. Like, I need money in order to. And
it's the history of our planet, you see,
yeah.
Because in the middle period, or I'm calling it loosely the middle period, when other systems came onto this earth, they brought all of that with them, and so we don't remember much to what was before, which was a complete congruity with nature and a completely different way of understanding exchange. Everything was freely given, and then whatever was freely given was subject to the understanding that everything is an exchange. And so there must be an honoring of one's own situation and the other party. And that's, by the way, how the donation system on Oracle Go works, if you should choose to use it. And of course, you have the choice.
We're receiving some specific questions about what people should do with their money, but I imagine that might be an individual choice. Do you have any recommendations around that?
I have answered those types of questions before. And firstly, that it's not quite the point and that your body apparatus will tell you. But secondly, it's better, rather than to ask for specific guidance there, to actually not act at the moment and really watch and feel into it and get a handle on such a new language, because it's not about which cryptocurrency or which kind of platform to use. It's more about looking at your immediate situation and thinking, what can I do now that doesn't require money? That's the first step. And then where you still need to use methods of exchange, asking yourself, okay, how much money do I still need and where do I need to focus with that? Because I can't do it for free, or I'm still having some type of dependency. And then what is left over, because you do require money to engage in cryptocurrencies, okay? So what is left over then to put towards the whole cryptocurrency scenario? Cryptocurrencies may not even survive or come into being if the whole of the economic system crashes while it's being rewired, which is a big possibility. For a temporary period, we may see none of that in existence. Who knows? So let's not get too carried away. Practicalities first.
I'm going to combine a question we had with one we received here about oneness and us being one. You've said before that we have oneness, we kind of get oneness wrong sometimes in spiritual communities. And a question we received here was, are we separate from other people? So there's these people there's us who see it this way, and these people who are not awake. Are we all one? And how is that relevant to what we bring forth for the collective?
I don't know if it is relevant. I mean, oneness is a bit of a funny word. I mean, what the hell does it really mean? And even if you know, what difference does it make? Yes, we are all interconnected, no doubt about that. But you're only at one, or you only feel a deep sense of connection with someone to the extent that your patterns have purified. And then what you could say is that you are in an individuated celebration of the fact that we are all the same and interconnected. But it's a similarity and a difference, of course. So you've got to use that kind of definition for any term that we might use about oneness or any similar word.
Just reviewing some new questions that came in.
Sure.
Yes, we will follow up, by the way, with you afterwards, maybe for a link to the law where people can just easily download it. That's been asked.
We will be sending that out through Oracle Girl as well if you found out about the event through our platforms. So there'll be several different ways you can get involved.
Wonderful. Yeah, we've received a question. What will happen with the people who are not willing or ready to see, accept, and open up to the light future that we're heading into? Will they all pass?
It will be a good death, to put it completely straight to you. Many of those people will shed the body, but in shedding the body, it means that 100% of their frequency will turn over to the new vibration. So let's just say that let's say if there was an option that was offered by the state that turned out not to go so well. And let's say that as a result of that intervention, you actually got ill or you died. Of course, we wouldn't want that to be the case, and it may not be the case, but let's just say worst case scenario that it was. If that happened, then as you drop the body, then everything would burn up into the overall frequency of the truth behind what's happening in this current reality. And this is why it is such an amazing time to be alive or dead. It's also why the death space is now releasing, and that everyone who has been trapped or affected negatively by that space is now receiving that amazing opportunity to get rid of all of that. It means you will cleanly pass on without any patterns going back into future generations here or weighing you down as you pass over. You will just not come back into the possibility of existence on this planet. You won't need to. You will just go back into that original setting. And the rules around the original setting are changing as well at the moment because of what's happening on Earth. But that's for another discussion, maybe.
We had a question about, can you talk more about land ownership? But they didn't really say much more. But what's the role of land ownership maybe and people who own land?
Well, many people are custodians of land, which is actually very important and special for the future. You know, land has patterns, just like humans. It's a body of earth.
Mm.
And there are many pieces of earth which have special instructions inside them, just like human beings do. It's why, until recently, I traveled to a destination for each silent immersion to actually go and plug into those instructions and then, if you like, import and integrate them into the purification space for everyone to benefit from. And that's what the silent immersion retreat in South Africa, for example, was especially about. So if you are a landholder, then it's likely that you have been given a piece of land to custodian and also perhaps to grow food on, or at least to hold as sanctuary for others. The accent is on sharing, but making careful choices around that sharing, or preserving that piece of land so that sharing is possible in a way that can be maintained consistently beyond the external boundaries of the property. It's up to you to decide. Land that has been stolen or taken or claimed by blood will be taken away from those who have been behind that, to the extent that they have not purified their patterns. Indigenous people will come to the fore during future times, although many will succumb to illness themselves. Not all Indigenous people are pure. Pure in the sense of being totally without patterns, and that is sometimes a slight, let's just say, a slight misunderstanding that's crept into the mix. There seems to be a belief that, if it's a shaman, from the rainforest, then it must be true. Indigenous people have just as many patterns as non-Indigenous people, to make that very crude division. And it is more about the vibration that each individual carries in serving their own source connection.
Well, I think we've covered a lot of what these questions have dealt with, but I would like to just sort of hand you and kind of an open moment to kind of, is there anything before we sort of sign off and tell people about what's next for everybody? Like, is there anything else that you'd like to share? Any sort of final kind of note that you'd like to strike?
Yes, I think let's go back to one of the happenings that I have talked about when I was on the Tibetan plateau. Because I've only told some parts of that story publicly, and it's an amazing story. I was there completing my PhD fieldwork, and this is before I went through my own changes and started to become more public myself. So during this patch, I was not really saying anything to anyone about what I knew and what I would be doing. And I came across an oracle on the Tibetan plateau who, as I've already revealed in several talks and on Facebook, told me that one day we would get up and that shops would all be closed, but it wouldn't be for the reasons that we'd been told. And she said to me that there were many things that I was prepared for and that I knew, and now was time to start saying them, and that my own path was beginning, or my proper path was beginning, and to go and get on with it. She also said something incredibly important, which I'd like you to keep an open mind about. She said something which went like this. She said, "Your leaders." And I said, And then she went, "Do you see what my hand did there?" I went in a zigzag right down my body. And I said, I knew what she meant. Does everybody else understand what I'm saying? I'll give you the words that she said next. And I said, yeah, okay, I understand, but you tell me what you are saying. And she said, your leaders, half human, half not human.
Mm.
Mm. Mm.
Do with that what you wish.
Mm.
You can interpret that in a more out there kind of way, or you can interpret that in the way which just suggests that maybe that there is something that has got into our structures of power that is not in our interests. The reason why I'm bringing it up is just to switch you on a lot deeper with an understanding in yourself that the part of you which may not be so much of this system and this planet, that comes maybe from somewhere else, it's your time. And those are the types of leaders who, in fact, are guardians, not really leaders, that we're looking for. It's you.
Mm. Thank you, Jacqueline. For anyone who's watching this who feels stuck in patterns, who this resonates with, but they feel like they cannot act or in any way feel stuck, how can they reach you? How can they work with you? What would you say is the next step for them?
So easy. Just go on my website, oraclegirl.org. And those links will be available with the rewatch link that comes out tonight on all the platforms. There's several steps, but the first step is getting a personal purification. It's on a Wednesday or a Saturday. Just join, even if you don't understand it, you will later. I will work on you personally through the group I hold on Wednesdays or Saturdays. You can be doing whatever you want to do. You don't have to sit down or meditate. There's nothing that you need to do. My ability is such that I am able to reach you and help to switch on your own self-healing ability. At the end of the day, you will receive a track to take that purification deeper, and you can work on your own self with that track. So, by the way, the purification is not just listening to the track afterwards. It is signing up for the actual personal purification on the day, which you receive from me. And then everything else comes from that. You will receive emails after that that help you and that show you which stage you can go on to next if you wish to. Give it a try. Keep an eye on us on Facebook or Instagram, and also through the many platforms where the work is showing up from me. It's all there from you. In the end, you won't be able to keep away from it. One way or another.
And speaking of our leaders, can you talk about how we put others into the purification space and the guardians of the future work?
When you sign up for your own personal purification, you can also sign up for others as well. You can choose me or you can choose someone else. And there are many categories underneath that. You can choose your family unit. You can choose an animal or a pet, your home, a piece of land. You can choose a business, a leader, or a politician. You can even choose a global issue or an environmental problem. You have the power to put things into the purification space, and then they will also receive the strength of the purification. It's a way that you then help to start purifying others as well as yourself. And there's a dedicated space for that as well on Sundays at 7, which you can learn about. But that space on Wednesdays and Saturdays, the Reboot group, is the place where you can do all of that. And it's the place to start.
Thank you.
Magnificent.
And we'll post everything in the comments below too, and make sure everyone has that information.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to speak with you tonight. It's been a really great experience.
Yeah, our
Thank
pleasure.
you so
truly.
much. Thank you.
If you're new to us, subscribe to our YouTube channel or join our Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/OwnStream. We welcome you. This is the kind of content we present, we talk about, we share about. This is sort of our call is to.
And also, may I add to that on your behalf that Teresa and Stephen carry very strong frequencies for the waking up of the USA. And actually, a few words from them are worth many, many hundreds of words from others. There is a vibration around their whole platform that is extremely important for the future. So I would strongly recommend it.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Jacqueline.
Well, everyone, I think we'll sign off.
Thank you for being
Thank
with
you
us.
for being
Thank
with
you,
us.